Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. So if we start with the first slide, then we'll. Okay, so I have to apologize. This is actually not my picture because I visit in winter because the Andes is where I prefer to be, and the Andes are better in the winter, which is our summer months. This is a Lima summer. As you can see, massive beaches, and it looks completely different in the summer. In the winter, it's covered in drizzle. The districts really to focus on are the ones that you're looking at in the background. Barranco, which is an arty district, Miraflores and San Isidro, which are the two upscale districts. And unfortunately, they're the complete opposite side of the city to the airport, which is in Callao, which is in quite a rough area. Fortunately, in all the time I've been traveling to Peru since the mid-90s, things have got better and better each time I've been. And there's even an airport shuttle bus now, and there has been talk for probably 2-3 decades now of an airport to city centre train, although that's not been built yet. Lima itself is quite a foodie city. Some quite incredible restaurants. The one that really is the standout is a place called Huacachina, which is in Miraflores, and it actually is a restaurant that is attached to a 1,500-year-old adobe pyramid. The restaurateur bought the land and had permission to open a restaurant in exchange for maintaining, restoring, and doing archaeological digs on the pyramid. And so there was kind of already quite a synergy there. If we move on to the next slide, this is the second of 3 that aren't my pictures. And the reason that this isn't my picture is because when I went up over the Nazca lines, my friend had just given me an Inca Cola, which is a kind of a Peruvian limeade. We went up, and unfortunately so did the Inca Cola, and I spent most of my flight over the Nazca lines with my head in a sick bag. Not recommended. These are geoglyphs about 7 hours south of Lima on the way to Arequipa. There's at least 70. They're finding more all the time. They're plants, animals, various shapes. They probably date from at least 700 AD, probably earlier than that, but nobody still really 100% knows what they are there for, who put them there, how they drew them. They're massive. The technology at the time would not have been as advanced as ours, so quite a mystery. Perhaps something to do with astronomy, perhaps to do with aliens, some people say, because one's in the shape of an astronaut. Next slide, please. This is Huacachina. This is a picture I took in 1995 on a grey day. Huacachina is an oasis in the desert near a place called Ica, which is where the grapes are grown for pisco. Pisco is nearby too. The lagoon has been developed quite a lot over the intervening years. These days, as well as these palm trees, you'll also have dune buggies, sandboarding. It's quite a big tourist draw these days. And not far down the coast, you've also got the Paracas Peninsula, big sandstone cliffs with an engraving called the Candelabria. The Ballestas Islands are just off the coast. You can go out into the Pacific, short distance offshore, you find the islands. And there's home to seals and penguins and flamingos, and most famously of all, the sea lions that you'll smell before you can see them. But there is definitely a boat trip to be recommended if the weather is okay. If the weather is rough, then it's the Pacific Ocean. This is not necessarily a great day. Going now to Cusco, please, Will. So this is the Inca capital. This is the one city that people will know if they know nothing more about Peru. The ancient Inca capital, 3,200 meters above sea level. And most people do fly in from Lima. Lima is at sea level. And so one of the first things you'll find when you get to Cusco is that the altitude will hit you. Some people cope okay, some people not so much. The city is basically in a bowl, so the higher up you go, if you walk up a hill, you're going to really feel it on your lungs. So the advice is just to take it slowly, enjoy chilling out, spend at least a day just wandering the city, just getting to grips with the lack of oxygen in your lungs. You can take pills, Diamox for example, but you can also buy coca leaves in the supermarket on the square and chew them, or drink coca tea. Coca tea is in every hotel, and the upscale hotels have got oxygen bottles as well, should you need it. So it's a real random thing whether you get affected by it or not. So really it's just it's pot luck. What you're looking at there is the cathedral. That's actually built by the Spaniards in the 16th century on top of Inca foundations, and that was something that they did a fair bit. Where I'm standing to take that picture, behind me would be the Church of La Compañía, which is a beautiful church as well. So you've got these two churches, and then they surround a square that's full of double-storey colonial style buildings with wooden balconies. Very, very pretty, lots of cafes. It's a great place just to chill and hang out. If you want to try a pisco sour, if you want to try a Cusqueña beer, this is the place to do it, but obviously that's going to whack you with the altitude as well. The next slide is actually looking back down to the cathedral. You can just see that tower there from the San Blas district, and this again gives you sort of an inkling as to the style of architecture. San Blas is quite an arty district, pretty little church, pretty little plaza, lots and lots of souvenir shops, and again just a nice place to hang out while you're getting used to walking at altitude. The following slide has some of the first pictures I took in 1995. That car came down to the Plaza de Armas right in the middle of town to feed the llamas. The ladies below got the alpacas and the lambs, and everybody brought their livestock after they'd had all the photos with tourists, brought their livestock down to the main square to feed, and then wandered off home with them. The picture on the right-hand side is actually a more recent one, as you can probably tell from the resolution. That's taken in 2014 at Inti Raymi, which is the festival of the sun god, which takes place every June apart from this year. Unfortunately, it's cancelled this year. It's a big reenactment of an Inca ceremony where they reenact a sacrifice, a llama sacrifice to the Inca gods. We are assured these days it is actually a reenactment, which is reassuring. Cusco in general, just really amazing ruins in and around the city. Coricancha down the road from the Plaza de Armas is an Inca temple, the Inca sun god Inti. It was dedicated to that god, and it was in its time covered in gold, completely covered in gold. Now the stonework is something to look at instead. Overlooking the city, you've got Sacsayhuaman, which is the Inca fortress, and where Inti Raymi takes place. But there's a whole load of smaller ruins where you can find Inca irrigation channels, Inca fertility kind of tombs and things like that. So definitely worth spending at least a few days in and around Cusco. But most people then move on to the Sacred Valley, which is the next slide, please. This is Ollantaytambo, which is, again, one of the most famous Inca sites in the Sacred Valley. About 45 minutes from Cusco on the train, but you can drive as far as this. It's on the way towards Machu Picchu, so a lot of people use it as a stop-off. The village itself, Ollantaytambo village, is lower than what you're looking at, which is part of the fortress itself. And it still has the Inca layout with some of the original Inca streets, cobblestone streets. And you also, if you go into the side streets, you can sometimes see the locals will still have the guinea pigs as they would have done in Inca times. And yes, you can eat them if you want to. It's possibly a fortress, Ollantaytambo. It might have been an imperial retreat. Nobody's 100% sure. But definitely very impressive ruins. And across the valley you see a row of storehouses as well, so it's worth a stop, if even for just a half day. The number of hotels has increased quite a lot in the Sacred Valley. A lot of people choosing to stay out there for a bit of sort of countryside rather than to spend all their time in the city. The next slide is also in the Sacred Valley, but a less visited site, and this is Moray. And as you can see, it's concentric circles, and they're probably stepped at about sort of 5-foot intervals, more or less, with little stones to help you get up and down. And they were used by the Incas as a kind of an agricultural workshop. Every one of those terraces has a slightly different microclimate. And so you're able to test out whether things would grow at different heights, at different altitudes. These days it's not used for that, but the site of the scale of it really shows you just what the Incas were capable of. The next slide is a place called Chinchero. A lot of people, when they're heading to the markets around Cusco in the Sacred Valley, they go for Pisac, which is the best known. It's the largest one, but it's almost a victim of its own success. Very, very crowded, and obviously, you know, aimed at the tourists. But if you go to Chinchero instead, on a Tuesday, Thursday, and preferably on a Sunday, it retains a little bit more of an authentic kind of character. There's people will be doing their regular shopping, as well as obviously the tourist paraphernalia as well. The next slide is also in the Sacred Valley, and not something perhaps that you would associate with, and that's the salt mining. These salt ponds were used in Inca times as well. It's fed by an underground stream, and it's fairly labour-intensive work still. It's all done by hand, and you can wobble between the different salt pans and get to chat to the guys that are actually harvesting the salt. The water evaporates in the sun. At altitude, it's quite hot even in winter, and the salt is nearly as good as Malden sea salt. Malden is my local place. Next slide is Machu Picchu, and this is the final one of the photos that isn't mine. If you're wondering what kind of amazing photographer I am, then no, that's not. But mine are just a bit more cloudy than that. So obviously Machu Picchu is Peru's best known attraction. The first visit I made was in 1995, where there was about probably 100,000 people went each year. In 2018, which is the last year figures are available, something like 1.7 million. The coronavirus outbreak may have just done people a favour, although the borders are currently shut. When the Machu Picchu is reopening roundabout now, there's only going to be 675 people allowed in per day instead of probably about 5,000. So if you are planning to go, go before people really think that Latin America is safe again. You just might be lucky. It's a citadel. It's 2,600 meters up above the Urubamba Valley, surrounded by lush forested slopes, as you can see, and the mountain in the background there that mirrors the shape of Machu Picchu is Huayna Picchu. You can climb that. You need a permit. Permits are very hard to come by, as are permits for the Inca Trail and, in fact, tickets for Machu Picchu itself. You can still go on a day trip. People go from Cusco, but you have to now go just outside the city to a place called Paroy. You used to be able to go right from the center of Cusco itself, and the first hour of the journey was a series of switchbacks, which was just the best bit of the journey. In the old days, everybody could go on the same train. In 95, we went on the local train in the pitch black. The train left in the middle of the night. Corn cobs came through windows if you wanted breakfast, and it was still dark. Quite a surreal experience. When I went back and did this in the tourist train in 2006, I actually found that there were snow-capped mountains along the way that I hadn't seen before, because we travelled in the pitch black instead of in a nice glass-topped train. Two companies run it now, Peru Rail and Inca Rail, and they're both pretty reliable. It's still a good idea to overnight in Aguas Calientes, or Machu Picchu Pueblo as it's sometimes called. If you're going to go for just a day or two, then you can time your visit and try and get a ticket in there for when less people are there. Moving on to the next slide is Arequipa. This is probably my favourite city in the country. This is where my friends are all from, so I'm kind of biased. This is known as the White City. The stone that you're looking at there is cilia, which is volcanic. And you can see just in the middle arch there, that is the cone of Misti volcano. Misti dominates from the Plaza de Armas. This is the Yanawara viewpoint. This is like an upscale neighborhood. It's got a cooking school. It's got lots of American style shops and restaurants and Starbucks and things like that. But it's a great place to view Missy from a distance. The next slide is Santa Catalina Convent. And this is a convent that dates from 1579, built by a wealthy widow. And this is just such a great place just to go and chill out. There's lots of seats tucked away in sunny corners. And it's just a really tranquil place to go and just kind of escape with a book. I absolutely love it. Also, in and around Arequipa, reasons to go, the Colca Canyon, that's twice as deep as the Grand Canyon, and at the Cruz del Condor, you'll see the Andean condors. But if you time your visit for June, if you look at the next slide, this is Corpus Christi in Arequipa, and what you're looking at there are pictures made from flowers, flower petals in shape of religious sort of icons, Jesus and all sorts of other tableaus, and they spend all day making them. Then there's a procession and a mass held, candlelight mass outside the cathedral, which is behind you in that picture. And then at the end of the mass, everybody trashes all of the pictures and literally kicks about all the petals, and has a bit of fun with what they've spent all day creating. In the morning, if you get up at 6, 7 in the morning, it's already cleared up. One final thing to go to Arequipa for is to see Juanita. She was a young girl sacrificed by the Incas in the 15th century, and she wasn't found until 1995. Up on the top of Mount Ampato. Climate change dislodged her from her snowy perch and unravelled where she'd been hiding. Next slide is Rakchi. Now, I'm aware a lot of people that join the Monday morning blues are train buffs, me too, but this is the one place I would say that taking the train you might actually miss out, because from Cusco to Puno on the train is a fantastic journey, but if you go on the bus, then they stop off at Rakchi, which is an old Inca tampu, which is a roadside inn, and this is part of the Huacachina temple that you're looking at there. And the next slide, you can also get your fix of alpacas and crias like this baby here, and bottle feed if you want to as well. So I love the train, but the bus really was better on this occasion. The next slide is Puno at the end of the line, for almost 4,000 meters above sea level, about 3,800 square meters above sea level on the shore of Lake Titicaca. Go in February for this one because it's a big festival of dance and music called the Candelaria, but it's also known for a steamship that was actually built at West Ham. My mum's a big West Ham fan. She was delighted that there was a link to her favourite football club for this pieces, this ship that was taken to pieces and reassembled on the world's highest navigable lake. It used to be run for the Peruvian Navy, then it was a B&B, and at the moment it's under restoration. The next slide is Lake Titicaca itself. This is, as I say, the highest navigable lake in the world, and the largest lake in South America. Maracaibo doesn't quite qualify, it's a bay. This is taken on my second visit. When I went in '95, there was no solar panels, and this is kind of progress. The Buros have managed to retain some of the income that they've received from the tourists that have visited and have used it to improve their way of life. But you can just see a pair of feet there. Somebody's having a little lunchtime nap. So the Islas Flotantes, the floating islands, this is made of reeds. They bounce if you jump up and down. It takes a bit of getting used to. But there are other islands on the lake that you can stay on, Amantini, Taculae. If you want to get out on the lake, it's a great experience to go and stay overnight. The final slide from the Puno area is Sillustani, which is a pre-Inca cemetery, and what you're looking at there is actually one of the tombs. This isn't Lake Titicaca, this is a smaller lake, but it's definitely worth going to have a look at those as well. And then heading up north, just for a change of scenery, to Chachapoyas, and the next slide is this Small place up till about 5 years ago, really difficult to get to. You had to get to Cajamarca or Tarapoto, fly there and then get a bus, and it was about a 12-hour bus ride from either. There is now an airport. The airport did open. They had an airport before. They just said they were really sorry, but there weren't any aeroplanes. But they did want to show you the airport. If you inquired about it, they would take you there and show you the airport, even though there were no planes, which is quite sweet, really. But there's one flight, one company now that will take you from Lima up to Chachapoyas. And the reason for the change is to do with the next slide, which is the pre-Inca 6th century fortress of Kuelap. Might have been a fortress, might have been a refuge. This is what they're touting as the Machu Picchu of the north. And in 2017, just after I visited, about a year after I visited, there was an opening of a cable car. And that doubled the number of visitors in that first year to 120,000. It's still relatively quiet, even before coronavirus. But it's definitely has that feeling of how Machu Picchu was when I first went in the 90s, when Peru was really just getting back on its feet after its terrorist problems. These circular huts, they don't know 100% how they would have been. They've reconstructed a few with straw roofs, but they're not really sure whether they've got that right. But there's some very strange, very football-like diamond-shaped friezes that reminded me of a football boot. They don't know why they're there either. So the guide wasn't very helpful, but the views are absolutely spectacular. Moving on to Karajia, which is another site near Chachapoyas. A steep hike down a very rocky trail or a horse will get you to these. These are actually mummies that were put there by the Chachapoyas people. The sarcophagi that you can see there contained bodies of probably the nobility. They're about 2.5 meters tall, made out of mud and wood and straw, and in the climate they've managed to survive all those centuries. They were nicknamed the ancient wise men, and they're literally stuck right up high on a cliff, and you really have to kind of strain your eyes to be able to see from such a distance. The final slide from the Chachapoyas area is Gocta, and Gocta is a waterfall that is in the distance between those trees. That until 20 years ago, people didn't know it was there. Local people did, but they feared the curse of a beautiful blonde mermaid if they told anybody it was there. So they didn't tell anybody. You have to go up and over a very steep ridge, and after a couple of hours trekking, you get to this waterfall, which is not very wide, but depending on who you talk to, either the 17th highest in the world or the 5th highest in the world. It's a bit dubious as to whether or not it's as high as they say it is. The guy that discovered it for the rest of the world said it was the 3rd highest in the world, but then he realized he'd got his measurements wrong. So it's high, it's remote, and it's definitely worth the trek. My penultimate destination is Cajamarca, and this is again kind of off the main beaten trail because it's up in the north. This is the place where Pizarro, the Spanish conquistador, tricked Atahualpa, the last Inca emperor, into exchanging a room of gold for the Inca's freedom, except it was a trap, and he took the gold and he murdered Atahualpa as well. Atahualpa was quite keen on the place as his kind of holiday home, and used to go to the baths at the top there for a dip. You can still go into the Inca thermal baths yourself today. And one thing that Cajamarca is really known for, on the next slide, is its very distinctive headgear. They're called sombreros de paja, and they're like a 10-gallon hat. And a really good one can cost something like $400, which for some people is almost a year's salary. So quite a big investment. My final slide is something that's kind of probably not what you expect from Peru, and that's the beach. This is right up in the north. This is Mancora. It's a surf hangout. It's a scruffy place. It's chilled out. It's not somewhere that's going to have all the glitzy resorts, but it's a great place to hang out. And if you go in the British summer, the Latin American winter, when the weather is best up in the Andes, then this is a nice kind of way of getting your sun fix on the way there or on the way back. But actually the surf breaks are better further south in Huacachina. If you watched the race across the world, the second one, and the Asian guys went out on a reed boat into the ocean. That's where the best surfing is, near Trujillo. And Chan Chan, the Chimu ruins, the big adobe ruins, they're the largest adobe city in the world. That's down there as well. So that was where I was supposed to be going this year. And in fact, instead, it will be next year, and the Cordillera Central, big mountain area as well. So that will be trip number 6, and I can't wait. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Julia. That was very interesting, fascinating, some beautiful photos. Itching to go back myself. I'm sure you've done a very good job for the Peruvian Tourist Board there. So on the bottom of your screens, or it's on the bottom of mine, but I don't know where it'll be on yours, you'll have a button called Reactions. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask Julia, if you could just go to Reactions and press the clapping hands, and then I will unmute you so you can ask your question. So do we have any questions? Yep. Okay, I'll go to Matt first. Should be unmuted. Yes, so Matt, fire away, please.
Perfect. Okay, great stuff. So Julia, you mentioned the massive increase in tourists from the first visit to Machu Picchu to a couple of years ago. I'm just interested, how have you seen Peru change since you first went there? And I guess, have you seen any positives and negatives to that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Matt. Thank you very much for asking. It's really changed immeasurably from the first visit to the most recent visit that I've made. The country is now a middle-income country, and it really was a low-income country when I first started visiting. Up till about 1992, they had a real issue with the Sendero Luminoso, the Shining Path guerrillas, which basically killed tourism. It was very, very dangerous to visit. People were being murdered all over the show. Once the guy was caught, then the country stabilised, and the government of successive governments have tried to invest in tourism. They know it's their major earner, but they've also really, I think, probably belatedly realised that actually you've got to spread people out. Machu Picchu is the main draw, and they really are starting to find that the impact of visitors on Machu Picchu is horrific. The danger that it's quite a fragile site up a mountain. For years they were discussing having a cable car up there like they are to Kuelap, and fortunately they held off. But it's really it really troubles you to look at the potential environmental impact there. So being able to market the Chachapoyas area and really kind of have the tourism spread out is going to be good for a lot of the country as well. The country still has considerable challenges to face. One of the reasons it's been so hard hit by the coronavirus outbreak is because so many people are living sort of on a day-to-day existence. They don't have a refrigerator. Something like 4 in 10 Peruvians don't have a refrigerator. They're going to the markets. At one point, 80 or 90% of market traders in Lima were infected with the virus. So there's, it's a real challenge for the government to take some of that money and make sure it is invested, and make sure people that are going to the country spend the money. But they've done certain initiatives like tourist tickets, where they'll charge different prices for Peruvians and for foreign tourists, just to kind of keep the destinations accessible for people who are on lower incomes, that are national visitors, which to my mind is a good policy. So it has changed. The electricity is more reliable, the water supply is more reliable. The first time I went to Cusco, there was water for 2 hours a day in the afternoon. There was electricity for 2 hours of an evening. And now there's a Starbucks in the main square. So it's come a long way, some good, some bad. But I think they're on the right track. And I think once the coronavirus hiccup passes, I think we'll see some interesting developments in the north of the country as well.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Any other questions? If you'd like to clap. Right, Jonathan, yeah, far away.
Hi, Julia. Can I put my alcohol writer hat back on and ask about Pisco? So how do you make it, and what do you think of it?
It's a great brandy. So it's basically a very, very strong, kind of like the same strength as schnapps, but it's actually a great brandy. And the Peruvians and the Chileans both think it's theirs. The Peruvians reckon they've got a stronger case. I'm probably biased, I would say they have. A pisco sour is the national drink in both countries. Pisco sour is lemon juice, egg white, pisco, and a sprinkling of nutmeg on the top. It's very, very potent, and especially at altitude. I unfortunately discovered that to my cost, but it's definitely worth trying. There's some places in this country that you can get one, but you really got to be there and have the kick of the altitude on top. So have it in Cusco or Puno or Arequipa, and have a few and right off the following morning.
I'll try. Thanks.
That's great. Any other questions? No? Okay, thanks, Julia. That was brilliant.
Thank you very much.
We're going to come